they'd lost face over the killing of Nasrallah and particularly over the widespread attacks on Hezbollah commanders and members. And losing face is one thing that most Middle East regimes, and in particular Iran, cannot afford.
Return to the situation in the Middle East, because of course Iran launched a series of missiles at Israel last night in response to the IDF's killing of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. World leaders have called for diplomacy, but eyes are now on Israel, anticipating its response. Michael Binyon is a leader writer for The Times and a former diplomatic editor. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Hugo.
Thanks very much for being with us. Look, you've covered a great many conflicts in this region. As I said earlier, you told me once about covering the Yom Kippur War in 1973. How would you rank the level of tension and danger now in the context of the past?
Well, I think the present war is much more likely to be on a much greater range, probably not as intense, but we're talking about ballistic missiles flying, 2,000 miles or so. The Yom Kippur War was pretty localized. It was it was in Sinai, along the borders of Golan. The Jordan front was quiet, but it was very intense. I mean, it went on for several weeks. This war, I mean, it could be short, it could be very unpleasant, but it also could be limited to airstrikes. And I don't think there'll be an enormous ground invasion of Lebanon. I mean, the Israelis have probably decided that that's not going to be worth their while actually occupying Lebanon. They've had unfortunate experiences trying to do that in the past. So I think it's going to be much more of an electronic war. On the other hand, it does mean that a huge number of innocent civilians are going to be killed just as much as they would have been had it been a hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah. Now, look, the Iranian strike last night, the huge Iranian strike last night, how do you interpret that? Was it a strike in which they were trying to sort of hurt and damage Israel, or was it a symbolic act of basically a regime that sort of felt like it had to appear to be doing something?
Well, it's probably a bit of both. It's certainly the second. They did feel they had to do something. They'd lost face over the killing of Nasrallah and particularly over the widespread attacks on Hezbollah commanders and members. And losing face is one thing that most Middle East regimes, and in particular Iran, cannot afford. The key concern for everyone in Iran is to protect their own Islamic regime, because they know that the regime itself is deeply unpopular with many people in Iran. We saw the huge demonstrations across the country a year or two ago. So they do need to show that they are serious in supporting those people that they are part of, that their own ideological allies. On the other hand, I think they did intend to do some damage. The rockets were sent over with not much pre-warning. The Israelis clearly were able to detect them, but the previous time, they more or less told everyone they were going to do it, so it was more symbolic. They probably knew that most of them, however, would be shot down, because they know the Israelis have this very effective Iron Dome missile defense system. So I don't think there was much more likelihood that they would get through.
Yeah, one hears it suggested sometimes that ordinary people in Iran, sort of as opposed to the regime in Iran, are far less hostile to Israel and the concept of Israel. Is that true in your experience?
I think it probably is. It's very hard to tell, but it's certainly true that the ordinary people are far less enthusiastic about the government's very activist, revolutionary philosophy of spreading Islamist terror or whatever abroad. That is of not much concern to most Iranians, who are desperately fighting against a very difficult economic situation. They're angry at the oppression that is still being leveled against women and people in general who are falling foul of the regime. So they would be quite happy to see the regime itself brought down. On the other hand, there is a sense of Iranian nationhood, of pride. They have a long and old history. And I think the danger of attacking Iran too fiercely is that people will rally around the regime. It would be a natural response. And then that might rather undermine attempts to split the regime from the people.
In that light, then, what sort of Israeli response would you expect? Because last time, of course, the Israeli response was indeed quite tokenistic. They only hit, I think, one site. Would you expect a really sort of devastating attack on military structures? Would you expect them to target the regime itself? What do you think is likely?
Well, I think Netanyahu has been itching to have a go at Iran for many years. In fact, he signaled as much some time ago, and his own defense minister and intelligence chief warned him against it, and so did the Americans. But this is now the perfect excuse. And I think possibly Netanyahu engineered it in such a way, knowing that Iran would attack, knowing that the Iron Dome would protect Israelis, and knowing it would give him the perfect excuse to go after particularly the nuclear facilities. That's what Israel wants to dismantle. They've done it in various ways before. They've used cyber attacks to dismantle many of the regime's, the nuclear research projects. But now they probably have very good intelligence about where the nuclear research is being developed, and they could target that area particularly. I don't think they would try to get a regime change. It's difficult to do that. I mean, unless you simply assassinate a whole lot of government people. And I think Israel realizes that would probably be taking on something rather too much. But no, it's military targets they'll go for. And equally, I don't think there'll be mass bombing of civilian areas. They may want to cripple some key oil refineries or port facilities or something like that, but not much more.
And look, finally, Michael, before I let you go, what are the prospects of this growing, this conflict? I mean, are there any other actors in the region who are itching or indeed likely to get involved? Or is Israel versus Iran as bad as it gets?
Well, of course, others are deeply concerned. But, I mean, amazingly, Jordan again helped to shoot down some Iranian missiles. I mean, the Jordanians have every reason to be pretty angry with Netanyahu because of Gaza and because of what's happening to the Palestinians there. And yet, Jordan has decided it will keep the peace treaty. It will not break off relations with Israel. Nor has the Gulf states. They haven't broken off relations. And Jordanians are hoping this thing can be limited to some extent.
Sure.
If the entire Arab street rises in revolt, then there's trouble.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael Binyon. Always a pleasure. Michael is a leader writer for The Times and former diplomatic editor as well.
مش هشيله